This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information and cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Our topics on this episode will be CTEM, Continuous Threat and Exposure Management. Ami Hofman is a cybersecurity veteran with over 30 years experience across information and cybersecurity, having spent many years previously working as a CISO across various sectors. Over the last 15 years, he has worked in an advisory capacity through NTT and Accenture, mostly in a worldwide format. He is a security generalist and over the last few years has specialised in the areas of threat and risk management, with cloud and data security as the main areas of focus. He's driven delivery of some of the largest uplift programs across the Southern Hemisphere and served as the inaugural CISO of Israel's national telco provider, Bezek. Ami provides thought leadership in a CISO best practice across emerging technology and innovation ecosystem, working with various organizations to scale a market-leading security practice and bring technology innovation closer to the market. Ami, a warm welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast, and thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on the episode.
Thank you so much, Jay and Warren. Pleasure to be here and looking forward for an insightful conversation.
So, Ami, if you'd be kind enough to start things off just by providing a very, very brief high-level overview of some of the topics we'll be discussing on this episode.
I think the main theme for today is risk management, what it means for modern digital business. We'll touch, across some of the common trends. CTEM is one example, continuous threat and exposure management. And we'll try and find, a few learnings and lessons that we can share with the audience today for those who are making, initial strides on their journey and have a broader interest in CTEM.
And if you'd be so kind, we usually all ask our guests really if they would be able to maybe shine a light on something that typically isn't found on your LinkedIn profile, for example.
I think the most close to heart and interesting element is I have a very close family. I spend a lot of time carrying global worldwide responsibility, operating from Melbourne, Australia. As you can imagine, had to spend a lot of time in North America, UK, and other parts of the world. I have 3 loving kids and a lovely wife, and they are the driving force, behind me. I really, appreciate this time of the year, which gives me an opportunity to spend a bit more time with my family to gain some more energy before we head to another, challenging stretch. So I just wanted to point this out. Not many people know I'm a family man. I enjoy every minute I get to spend with my family, and they are the driving force behind me.
No, that's brilliant, and that's certainly a reason and a why that resonates with me, as well as perhaps members of our audience today. And could you share with us something that you've perhaps faced in your career that significantly influenced your perspective on cybersecurity, Ami?
Yes, I think I've been around for quite a bit of time. My career thus far, I spent over 35 years in different geographies, different industries. I've been on the receiving end as a client for almost 20 years, and I've been in various different capacities as a service provider, as an advisor for 15 years. I had lots of opportunities to take on board various different challenges, both from a technology and business perspective. I think the most interesting, experience for me was an engagement about 15 years back with a tier 1 banking financial organization in Australia. The journey starts with this financial organization had failed an audit, and what it meant for them, bottom line, is they weren't able to conduct business in certain economical hubs in the region. The theme at the time was super regional, so obviously this was a big thing. They brought a figurehead from the UK as a CISO, and what they had to do in a nutshell is they had bits and pieces, but they didn't have a complete security program, so they had to establish a security program. We went on a journey, on a 5-year journey. I ended up spending there almost 4 years with the bank, basically building a security program from the ground up for a tier 1 bank. I'm a technologist, I'm coming from a solid technology background. This was, the first time for me, the sheer size and extent and complexities along the way with various lines of business, geographies. The bank at the time was operating across about 45 different countries, mostly in regions, but also in the UK and North America. I had to pull, various different parts of the business, bring them on the journey, find the right balance between, technology and the business, quite, disruptive and competitive markets. And while doing so, enabling quite a few capabilities to take them on the journey. They're now a leading cybersecurity organization, and those 4 years was a great learning experience for me.
And obviously, we want to try and understand the vital importance of CTEM. Could you explain what continuous threat and exposure management is and why it's becoming such a crucial focus for many organizations in today's cybersecurity landscape?
Yes, and it's quite a loaded question, to be honest. I'll try and peel this one layer at a time. And CTEM went through a number of iterations. I think in a nutshell, if we start with the bottom line, existing mechanisms such as penetration testing and application security reviews and other mechanisms we use today are providing, fragmented point in time view of the actual, risk and exposure levels, and are not being an effective tool to help organizations, manage emerging risks. That's the bottom line. So there's a need for a new approach. And what CTEM is saying in layman terms is, in the current day and age, this is a continuous effort, and you have to test your people, process, technology, test and validate across various different advanced threat scenarios and some agreed metrics continuously over the year. It's not a once-off. Now, there's a number of drivers behind this, and this is why I said it's quite a loaded question. I'll try and give you a few examples, because I think the bottom line is the cheese have moved as an industry, and this is now a necessity, right? And the time is yesterday. It's a burning issue, and there's a number of reasons to this. Number one, there's a change in the balance of forces and the leadership structure for most organizations. When I was a CISO 20 years back, the structure was star-based. The CISO was sitting in the center. Everything was going for the CISO. The CISO was approving and rubber stamping everything. This is not how it works today. In most cases, CISOs would be in consultative and governing, capacity. I've seen many cases, they don't own the budget, they don't own the decision. They would work with the business to provide requirements, to provide guidance, to be this trusted advisor internally, but they no longer have a big stick, they can use over people's head. And as such, it's more about building the bridges with the business, creating partnerships, finding allies on the business side to drive, this notion of shared accountability, to take them on the journey with you. So that's number one. Number two is the current ecosystem we work in, and this is not unique to Oz, UK. This is worldwide, the global economy. We're seeing slowing economy, growing cost pressures, shrinking budgets. I'm speaking to many organizations. They either have a challenge in terms of shrinking budgets and growing cost pressures, lots of questions around value for money, or best case, standing at the same spot. It's very hard for them to free up additional capital they can use to fund new initiatives. Businesses are trying to react, right? There's high level of disruptions in various different industries. This is not just in banking. Every industry, there's various different disruptors. There's changes to consumer preferences with, Gen Y and Gen Z, for example, like to consume everything in a very different way on mobile. The business is trying to react to this. I'll give you an example. When I worked with some of the large financial organizations in this region 10, 15 years back, the average go-to-market to take a new service was 15 to 18 months. Now the language is 60 to 90 to worst case 120 days, right? And some cases I've seen, this level of nimbleness and agility being built because they have an aspiration to take new services and new offerings to market in a short period of time. And the last thing is the technology ecosystem is very different, right? When I was a CISO, everything was confined to the local data center. Okay, there was early days of hosting. I now, when I speak to clients, they have complex, stretched environment, on-prem, off-prem, private cloud, multi-cloud, SaaS. There's an emergence of microservice-based architecture, modern pipelines. How do you now, apply security to this? And if you add the dynamic nature of many modern digital environment, it just adds complexity, which means the traditional paradigms are not going to work. In this new ecosystem, we have to take a new approach. Now, if you look at CTEM, because I think there's also a lot of confusion in the market. It's a hype. Certainly in North America, I think UK and the rest of the world is slightly behind. Lots of organizations are trying to create some association with CTEM because it's a hype. But I wanted to clarify, it's not a single initiative, right? It's not a control. It's typically quite a complex program of work that overarches both technology and business and includes a number of components. Now, we'll talk later on about the phases and how you deliver this, but this is typically a 3 to 5 year journey for the business. This is something they need to take seriously. Again, it's not a once-off, one-time exercise, they tick the box, they move on. It's a journey. And obviously, as any other journey, it has a start and an end and a few phases in between, and you have to plan in advance to be successful.
And you've touched on it somewhat, but what would you consider the key success factors are for organizations when implementing CTEM, and how can they ensure that their approach is as effective as possible?
Love the question. And look, there's no one recipe that works for everyone. I can provide my own personal view, having been a CISO and having been on an advisory, capacity working with various different enterprises. First, I think nowadays, always has been, but even more nowadays, being able to properly articulate a good story to your exco on board, it's all about storytelling, right? And at the end of the day, for you to be able to build a narrative, there's two key elements in here. One is you need to clearly articulate where you are, which means what are the accurate levels of risk and exposure for the business. And when you do this, and again, I've been coaching lots of CISOs. I've worked with boards. They don't want to have this conversation in isolation, which means if you're Lloyd's and you are a financial organization operating out of the UK, then it's most likely for your ExCon board to ask questions related to your peers in the geography, your peers in the industry. If you bring another large financial organization in the US, yes, it's relevant. But if you talk about a mining organization in South America, then it may not be a good reference point, right? So you need to pick the relevant reference point. Every organization will have a certain risk appetite. They need to understand first where they are and how do we compare with the rest of the market, right? Because at the end of the day, they will have a risk appetite. You need to figure out, the journey and where you're trying to be. Obviously, if you use the traditional risk management exercise, you want to identify the key items that are at the moment outside of your risk appetite and build a plan on how you're going to bring them inside of your organizational risk appetite. The other thing, which I think is more important, is the progression. And this is something organizations don't do effectively, don't do consistently over time. Because what you want to do, even if you're quite immature today, and by the way, many organizations are trying to avoid providing a true and accurate reflection for their business because they are concerned of the potential consequences. I think it's a major mistake because security is not just a CISO problem, right? It's an organizational problem. It goes all the way to the CEO and all, the rest of the business, ExCo board, your business leadership, and obviously your technology leadership. It's a shared accountability. They need to come on a journey. So you have to be honest and reflect, a true reflection of where the business is. But then more important, you need to find a way to demonstrate progression. Now, progression is challenging. I get this question often. How do you demonstrate progression? Where do you start? Right? And obviously, it's important first to find the right data points. So, for example, when I speak to CISOs and we talk about the various different areas and where do you start, one of the key points I raise is if it's not measurable, if you can't build empirical data that would demonstrate how you're building maturity across this area, drop it, right? Because first, no one is going to appreciate effort, and it's going to be very hard for you to articulate back to the business the value for money and how money was used as an investment to build maturity in a certain area. Two is you need to start simple, right? This is, again, a common mistake where you sell the dream and you try and deliver the dream day one. This is where people fail. I'll give you an example. This is from my experience, and it's easy because CTEM is also a mechanism. I published something on LinkedIn a few weeks back about the need to build bridges with the business to drive this notion of shared accountability, to bring other people on the journey with you. And I use this example. All organizations have simple SLAs. I use this example. For example, critical applications have to be patched within X days or weeks. And they have this, it's documented, but it's not being measured effectively. It's not being enforced. There's no real ramifications, part of which is because remediation is not done consistently, not done, effectively at scale. So what I often suggest is pick one or two. Use this as a common SLA. Pick one ally, pick one application owner that can be a change agent that will be more receptive to this new approach because it can be disruptive at times. So you need to find a change agent that understands the value, willing to come on a journey with you. Start there. Start reporting. Uplift your board reporting. Start reporting on progression. Demonstrate where you've had success. The business is likely not going to embrace everything they want and go with a big bang. This is where you have to sell the vision, the value, but then go back and find the smaller increments that you can pick, early on to start the journey, get people excited, bring them on the journey, get other people, to share some of their accountability. It's all about a journey, and it's quite subjective between one organization and another. Depends on the culture and the willingness from people to adopt this new approach.
No, it's important, obviously, to get those tactical wins, get them in early. You get that buy-in from the business, and then you can get sort of the group to move in the same direction to achieve that strategic goal. And just sort of taking things stepping back a little bit, we obviously covered off sort of pen testing, for instance, as a traditional method that organizations are perhaps utilizing. But vulnerability management and risk management, of course, is something that a lot of organizations, regardless of their size and scale or where they're at on a cybersecurity journey, utilize. So for our audience out there that may not be familiar in terms of what the key differences are between sort of vulnerability management, risk management, and CTEM, could you briefly outline that?
So traditional risk management looks at two aspects of an item. An item can be vulnerability, potential risk. One is the exploitability. How susceptible is anyone to really exploit this risk, vulnerability, or anything else? And the other vertical is what is the potential impact. Now, there's various ways, about this. using empirical and non-empirical data. This is, something that have been quite mature in the market in the last 30 years. The problem with, traditional risk management and the way it's drifted over time is the fact it's being done in isolation. It's not easy when you try and bring things into context, because again, when I say into context, you have to look at the broader people, process, technology, and at the broader ecosystem and what would be the potential impact for the business if a certain application or a certain service is going to be impacted through an event. And what I've seen over years is various different elements are being evaluated, are being associated with a certain risk score, which is completely out of context, overlooking the broader context. And then the business is hit in an area that was completely not taken into consideration. I think CTEM first takes a more holistic approach, takes the complete people, process, technology in consideration, and it's not a point in time. Because again, you look at a traditional life cycle, you have a new project being initiated, you do some risk evaluation. Again, big organizations, they would do initially threat modeling because they want to identify the type of threat vectors that would be relevant given the technology ecosystem and the nature of the new services they take to market. They do some risk evaluation, considering some of the controls and the processes they have in place. They would give some scoring, and based on the scoring, it would dictate the requirements, the combination of controls that had to be applied to this service. But it's a once-off. And then, the last step before you go into production, you do some pen testing to tick the box, and on you go. But there's lots of flows, along the way, because as I was saying, this generates a very fragmented and point-in-time view. There's lots of drifts, over time, and lots of examples around this, and most of the incidents, I've been involved with the last few years, where shadow IT, unmanaged environments, an S3 bucket that was sitting on an cloud environment and no one was aware that it has a lag available on the internet, some pre-production environment that was spun up for a week because someone wanted to run full regression testing for the next billing version using real production data, not realizing this was not following corporate policies. Those are the type of trigger points for those type of events, not necessarily the core of the enterprise and how processes were managed.
No, that's brilliant. And it's essentially sort of the next phase of vulnerability management, the next evolution. And we've seen many of our partners sort of utilize CTEM in terms of a way of working, in terms of securing and building resilience in the sort of IoT and OT environments as well. And that's something that we feel is going to evolve over time. What are your thoughts on that, Ami?
I think, from an adversary perspective, an adversary would use the weakest link. And, there's a saying in the industry, as a defender, you have to get it right every time. The adversary only needs to be successful once. And I think the most staggering point is the average dwell time is over 200 days, right? Still very high. Often I'm being asked, and this is again, shadow IT, shadow AI, ROG and unmanaged devices. IoT is a great example. And again, if you look under the covers, I've done a lot of work with critical infrastructure, resources, mining, and such. They go on this digital transformation journey because it means massive cost savings for them. All right, they digitize their entire operations, right? And every percentage of cost saving translates to billions of dollars. But security is not part of the conversation. Security is still a last mile bolt-on approach. if you add on this the IT and OT convergence, where in many environments, the traditional IT and OT environments have various different connections, just compounds to the problem. CTEM again gives you an opportunity to take a holistic approach and identify where you have gaps. There's one point I want to also mention in here, because when I started engaging with the market a few years back, coming out of a zero trust journey, the environment was still quite well defined. The majority of the market was focused on perimeter security, had well defined entry and exit points. The environment has expanded. There's numerous entry and exit points. At the back of COVID, we were all accommodated to hybrid way of working. The endpoint have become the new corporate perimeter, and as a result, security have really become a data problem, right? Where most of my clients, are on a journey. There's a notion, something called observability, and the idea is for you to be able to really, have the right data points for you to understand the patterns of behaviors, trends, anomalies, potential malicious behavior, for you to take action. That's all, part of CTEM as well, right? To really take a holistic approach to risk management, identify where you don't have the right visibility and context, have this through a continuous exercise. And as you said, there's small wins and small, progression over time. Again, in my experience, it's a 3 to 5 year journey.
Yeah, and we've worked with seen and heard organisations that are perhaps going on an AI journey to improve efficiencies and obviously lower costs. And the ones that have perhaps sort of fallen short or fallen over are those that haven't really invested time in really understand their data from a security standpoint as well before they've gone out to sort of implement systems. So they've really sort of forgot that discovery phase and forgot about putting a strategy in place, and they've just gone straight for the technology. Which is a poor way of working, unfortunately.
Agreed. And I think so. First, AI is obviously a key vehicle in two respects. One is automation, and the other one is economies of scale. Okay? And I think it is expected now in the market for almost every security solution to have machine learning, AI behind the scenes to drive efficiencies, to drive those economies of scale. As an industry, reliance on humans is not going to work anymore. I think you can't completely take the human out of the equation, but we're certainly going into a world with Gen AI on both ends. Now, obviously, it serves the adversaries with deep fake and other platforms and tools and enterprise like mindset. We've certainly seen a growth in terms of volume and sophistication of emerging threats. It also helps to defenders. I think that's the only way. There's lots of examples where, for example, when it comes to building a next generation SOC around the triage, investigation, remediation, containment. There's lots of areas where we can use AI and automation tools to build the economies of scale. Again, my example is I've worked with many organizations who are looking to develop playbooks. Start simple. It's also a cultural item as well. People need to be accommodated to some of this. You need to find a good balance between security and usability. Some of those approaches might have some impact on usability. Sandbox is a great example. People thought it's a great technology, has massive impacts on usability, and what you see bottom line with many organizations, they're just disabled. They're not using Sandbox because it's quite a disruptive technology, and like any adoption of new technology, you have to take it in small steps. There's areas, for example, around managing your external threat landscape. There's lots of opportunities to connect the bits and pieces, things around the brand monitoring and dark web monitoring and attack surface management, and bring all the bits and pieces together to give you a complete outside-in view from an adversary perspective. I have seen, some moves from the regulators. There's something in Australia called CORIE, CORIE, which is, enforced by the financial regulator, which basically says it's going into the second year of beta. It's going to be mandated, shortly. And basically what it says is you have to employ advanced adversary simulation to test your people process technology against, advanced threat scenarios. And again, in my mind, this is something organizations should invest in. It's a necessity.
So in terms of I guess organizations understanding when the right time, is to embrace CTEM, how urgent is it for them to adopt, this approach? And given some of the increasing complexity of the threats we've talked about and an ever evolving market, when do you feel organizations need to understand when the best time for this is?
I'll try and not be too cynical because the time is yesterday, right? It's certainly urgent when it's a necessity in the current day and age, given the digital economy we all live in. And I'm saying to some organizations, if you feel happy about buying a lottery ticket, go ahead until you decide it's time to take a different approach. I certainly try and promote the urgency with some organizations. I think there's a problem as an industry. And again, this is why I was trying to restrain my cynicism, because at the same time, I respect it's not easy being a CISO nowadays. Speaking to many organizations, as much as I would like to think that this is a shared accountability and we all invested, still many organizations see cybersecurity as an expense, as an overhead. And still I hear from many CISOs, we don't get the support, the buy-in, certainly not the funding from our leadership. I find it funny. I still hear from many organizations that their board and ExCo is saying, nothing major happened in the last 3, 5, 10 years. Why should we invest in cybersecurity? And I think there's a bit of educational exercise here. There's a lot of awareness and education that need to be invested in to take people on the journey and really emphasize the urgency. Now, the net result for many organizations, and it's unfortunate. A colleague was asking me, my reflection after almost 35 years as an industry. Are we winning or not? And my immediate answer was absolutely not. And I think we're going backwards instead of going forwards. And the very poor reflection on the market is most organizations can't do anything sophisticated. They're still stuck doing the basics. Most houses are invested in trying and have good hygiene day to day. And some of them are even scared to try and suggest anything that is a bit more sophisticated and has, this potential disruptive aspects like CTEM. And this is why I do a lot of work upfront with CISOs. I see two groups at the moment. I haven't seen a single CISO that never heard about CTEM, don't understand the benefits. I think given the various social platforms and available literature, and certainly the backwind we get from Gartner and others, people are aware. But the CISOs are in two groups at the moment. One group is the CISO that thinks that it's still too futuristic for them and they're still stuck with the basics, and maybe we'll revisit this in 2 years, maybe. It's time, but for the time being, we're just going to put it back on the shelf and, keep on with this lottery ticket. And the other camp is people that are fully invested in CTEM. They understand what CTEM means. They understand the benefits. They need help. They need people with experience to come and help them sell this to the leadership. They need people with experience in terms of delivery. And we'll talk about phases and such, because this is quite complex. And to get something like CTEM off the ground, you need their experience specifically around, shared accountability, finding the right increments to getting this off the ground. And once they have the right level of assistance, I think they will make initial, strides. But the story is slightly different between one organization and another. And I think we have a window of opportunity in the industry. It will become a necessity for every organization, I would say, in the next few months.
That's brilliant. And I know we've touched upon it earlier in discussion, but very briefly, how significant is the role of automation in CTEM, and how can organizations sort of leverage that to enhance threat detection and response?
The level of reliance, 0 to 10 is 10. You won't be able to build something like this consistently with the required economies of scale without relying on automation, without relying on various different use cases for AI and machine learning. Right? You have to. Obviously, you need to be selective, and AI is not a one silver bullet to solve all problems. So you have to be selective. First, CTEM framework includes a number of components, overarching both technology and business, and comes together as a strategic program. There's different approaches to this, and sometimes with some organizations, I would use a hybrid approach. You can either take a strategic approach, proper top down, and do a by the book approach. You can use a bottom up, or in some cases, you would use a hybrid approach. And I think along with that, you would identify the right opportunities to use automation. All right. Automation will come, and automation again is a necessity, but not something I would start with. I spoke to a CISO recently in a large financial organization in Australia, and he was reflecting on this because he was saying, his view is you need 2 years. You need to be very mature around the capability. You need to run it for about 2 years to really understand what you need to be able to automate some of it, and maybe bring other partners on the journey as well to augment some of your internal capabilities. I see lots of failures where organizations are trying to look for shortcuts by outsourcing some of it day one early on before they are mature enough to have a better understanding on their requirements and what they really need, and it ends up not really well for them in most cases.
And looking ahead to the future, what emerging trends and innovations do you believe are going to shape the future of CTEM?
I think we're heading to a period with big changes. First, big changes on the business side, because where we're going in terms of the global digital economy, I think businesses are just going to accelerate the digital journey, and they'll be inspired to to get closer to becoming a digital native. I've spent time with lots of organizations across various different geographies already made hard commitments to their leadership to kill their traditional data center business, move completely to cloud. So I think in that respect, the future is going to be interesting. The offerings when it comes to cloud-based and SaaS-based applications, is growing almost by the minute, with hundreds and thousands of various different SaaS offerings, and I think this is the future. I've done, even in the financial industry, I've done quite a bit of work with large financial organizations, and again, initially they had very little appetite when it comes to public cloud, when it comes to SaaS. It's just a necessity. There's no other way for them to really accelerate the journey without embracing, the digital future. That's, on the business side. On the technology side, again, I think we're heading for big changes. So you might have heard about the fact that CIEM is dead as a concept. CIEM was developed, years ago. The concept was about, crunching logs, identifying, the right log sources, event telemetry. You fit this into, a sophisticated engine with, long list of various different correlation rules, and it will help you crunch information and identify, patterns of behavior. It doesn't work. As I was saying, we security have become a data problem. Now we're going back, whether it's big data or whether it's, specially designed security solutions. We've seen various different approaches and iterations, but the concept of CIEM is dead. Similar with vulnerability management. So again, the terminology have changed. Now the market is saying sources of telemetry. Vulnerability management can be an example of one telemetry source. Other examples can be configuration data, cloud telemetry, audit data, penetration testing, and modern solutions will have to take sources from various telemetry sources in various different structures and format, bring this into, normalize this, bring this into some common format, correlate this along with, business context and help you develop a short prioritized list of items. I'm sure you heard about this term called event fatigue, and I think this is a common, issue. The noise to signal ratios, often, and if you look at some of the recent breaches and events, in most cases the signal was lost in the noise, and by the time organizations have realized something happened, it was too late. So I think there's a necessity from a technology perspective to evolve some of the traditional paradigms, offer something that is more relevant to this day and age. I also expect, I think, the various different acronyms, it's convenient for some of the, analysis and consulting brands. For example, application posture management, cloud posture management, data posture management, SaaS posture management. The poor client wants to go to market and look for a data security product. Which way do they go? It's extremely confusing. Each of the acronyms I just mentioned has some relevance to data security. Which way do you go? So I think eventually this market will go through consolidation. The current economical climate is also pushing for, the smaller businesses to be acquired by some of the bigger brands. And I think we're heading to some exciting times, the next 12 to 24 months. We'll see how it goes.
No, that's good. Appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And look, you bring today a truly global perspective and a wealth of experience. So from your sort of perspective and things, what are the key elements that define high performance culture in both tech and sales teams?
It's a very good question. First, cyber is a team's game. There's a few things. One is to drive a culture of shared accountability. As I was saying, security is not just a CISO problem, and unfortunately, this is not easy, right? In my experience, to be successful, you will have to develop some sort of a framework that would, underpin your approach to drive this shared accountability. This is something that has to be, top to bottom. It needs to come from the CEO and your board, and then you have to obviously cultivate this in pockets. That's the starting point. Drive this notion of shared accountability. The other element is around clarity around your vision, because many times either the business wouldn't have a clear vision, or they're not sharing, the clear vision when it comes to people on the ground. They work in isolation. They look at the world through a keyhole, and you don't want that. The third element is you have to create a world where everyone has a voice. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has responsibility. Everyone has the opportunity to make an impact. right? The traditional pyramid structure where, the top level managers have, we're taking all the decisions and we're doing all the thinking for the business, doesn't work anymore. It's all about roundtables where, it's all about equality for people that's sitting around the table. Obviously, you need to build some mechanisms because HR need to be involved. You have to measure, the success. So, for example, some of the practice, I've seen in other organizations. I'll give you an example. Functional teams tend to see it in isolation. You have one area for developers, one area for HR, one area for security. So another good practice is to start blending the teams. This can be once a day, can force the security team to go and spend a day, with another team. I think more effectively, you just blend the team so that you don't have, it's not confined to a physical location, to a certain room. They're blended. The other thing is, and this is often when I manage conversations, for example, around remediation. Remediation is a big pain point for many organizations. It's not done effectively, it's not done consistently, it's not done at scale. And when you peel the onion, you see often developers, they don't have a security KPI. They're measured on lines of code, quality of code, how quickly they can take new feature, new service to market. They're not measured on security. So as a business, what you want to do is to build some cross teams KPIs so that, I'm measured on your success and I have vested interest based on the KPI because it has to be a sophisticated KPI for you to be successful and vice versa, which, using this mechanism to force Warren and Ami and Warren and Jay to work together and ensure that we are all successful as a team. And again, you do it in steps until this becomes, part of the border culture.
I mean, it's been fascinating insight into to a lot of the topics we've covered today, and it's clear that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to CTEM. Could you sort of please share some more about your own cutting-edge security services and your journey into the business, and maybe some of the challenges that you're currently working to solve, and your purpose and vision for our audience?
I was actually, when I was doing my due diligence and business analysis, I was thinking about the best place where, Ami, my personal journey, my 35 years in the industry, where I can help others and where I can, demonstrate my value to make an impact. I've identified two areas. First, from a technology perspective, I think there's a bit of a drift between the technology ecosystem and the business. From a technology perspective, I've dealt with most and many security partners over the years. The approach was to sell on speeds and fees. We have better technology, faster, with different features. No one goes to market, yet to buy another controller. I think vice versa, with cost pressures, with the disparate nature of many modern security ecosystems, where we're talking about the notion of a tightly connected security issue. We're way behind as an industry. Most clients are looking for any opportunity for consolidation and optimization. They're not going to go to market yet to buy another control. And as such, as a technology vendor, unless you're able to really associate and tie your technology with the right narrative, buying motion, and pain point, the client is not going to buy. And vice versa. Having spent so many years as a client, as an advisor in various different geographies and industries, I think what I bring to the table is the ability to really tie what the client is on the journey with the right technology offering. I've also realized that the experience I bring as an individual and my understanding in technology landscape, there's also an advisory opportunity. I speak to many clients, they need help when it comes to CTEM. And CTEM is complex. You have to sell it to your exco and board. It typically involves some initiation paper where you sell the vision, why we should invest in this initiative, what are the benefits for this organization journey. Then you need to develop a strategy with a start point and an end point and key goals. It then goes into a horizon roadmap. You need to establish a program, map the roles and responsibilities, develop a framework. You might need another framework for this shared accountability. It goes into execution. You need to build a governance and operating structure. Those are all areas that you need to bring experience. And I've learned for many organizations and my clients, they would like, to use my experience to help them get this off the ground. And this is where Cutting Edge currently operates, both helping technology partners, bridge this gap with the market, as well as, working directly with clients in different geographies to help them accelerate on this journey.
Well, it's clearly going to play a very, very important part in the future of cyber, that's for certain. And for all of our listeners who want to stay connected beyond this episode and the platform, where else can people reach out to you, Ami?
I'd love to connect with people. I think the easiest is on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. Happy to share also the best way to connect via Cutting Edge, via phone and email. But as I was saying, LinkedIn is probably the best way to make initial contact, and we can take it from there.
Fantastic. So, Ami, listen, thank you for giving us some fantastic insights today. I'm sure the community and all our listeners will have found a huge amount of value in today's session. To continue the discussion and for more sustained engagement, we invite you to join the Secure Cyber Connect community, where we're offering a range of collaborative solutions for both technology and security professionals, as always at no cost. This includes expansive community access, cross-sector mutual mentoring programs, weekly online networking sessions, and exclusive interviews around a range of topics such as CTEM and future panel discussions and masterclasses. If people want to learn more and gain access to the community and on any of our initiatives, please visit all the W's, secure-recruitment.com/cyber-connect/. Thank you again.